Dr. Christopher D'Adamo, epidemiologist, is the Director of Research at the Center for Integrative Medicine at the University of Maryland. He evaluates the efficacy of nutrition in promoting health and wellness through clinical trials.
Hello, my name is Christo D'Adamo, the Director of the Center for Integrative Medicine at the University of Maryland School of Medicine. And it's a pleasure to present this topic of dietary supplement quality that covers a broad range of therapeutic applications, but actually going to kind of turn the lens and focus specifically in on EMF mitigation. But I hope you find these tools to be helpful in your practice or even your own personal lives. So for those that aren't familiar with integrative medicine, this wheel encapsulates it pretty well. So it's the integration of both conventional therapies, so things like surgery and pharmaceuticals, with a wide variety of, what are often called complementary modalities. So things like manipulative therapies would be things like massage or chiropractic adjustment, energy medicine, that would be acupuncture, qigong, those types of things. Mind-body medicine, so that would be in your, meditative breathing exercise type of realm. Lifestyle and behavior, and of relevance today is nutritional medicine and herbal medicine. So it's the integration and appropriate usage of all of these different therapies. And today we're just going to kind of go through what dietary supplements are, what some of the patterns of dietary supplementation are. It's an ever-evolving landscape. How dietary supplements are regulated. This may come as a surprise even to those of us in the medical field. And then go through a number of resources that you and patients can utilize with respect to how to find clarity on what products contain, how efficacious the products are, and then importantly, the purity of products in general. And then finally, look at supplements that may help mitigate EMF exposure. And these are really just supplements. We need more data, but there is some promise, and I hope you find this to be useful. We'll just kind of start out the big picture overview of dietary supplements. They are defined in the 1994 Dietary Supplement Health Educational Act, also known as DSHEA, as a product other than tobacco intended to supplement the diet. And dietary supplements, as their name implies, contain at least one dietary ingredient, and they're taken orally. So something like a probiotic skin cream, for example, would not be considered a dietary supplement. And there are four main categories: vitamins, minerals, herbs or other botanicals, and amino acids. And these are all supplements that have some data supportive for immune system health, which is on everyone's mind these days, of course. And if we look at the patterns, this is the most recently published data from the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey in JAMA 2016, which is actually quite dated as the supplementation patterns are constantly changing, but it is the most recent large database we have. We see that over half of Americans take at least one supplement, and this is pretty consistent. So for quite a while, and this is actually maybe even somewhat conservative. We see some of the factors here that are associated with dietary supplementation. So women, those that are more educated, Caucasians, and older adults are actually the most likely. We see 72%, in fact, of older adults take a supplement, and 10% of Americans take at least 4 dietary supplements. This is a practice that's, I'd say, even more common in integrative and functional medicine, where sometimes we'll see people coming in with a Santa Claus sack full of different supplements, and there's some potential issues with taking that many. But in any case, these were the most common at that point. Multivitamin and vitamin D have stood the test of time recently. These are two of the most common. We see some others here. We're going to get into some more recent data. And there are many combinations. You go to your health food store on Amazon, you can find everything. And you see a lot of these combination products. And oftentimes that is good when there's clinical data supporting it or strong mechanistic understanding. Sometimes not so good, and where you get these sort of pixie dust, as we call it a lot of times, of just labeling hot ingredients and so on. And we don't really know how much are in there or how they interact, but we'll get into that as we go along. But I do want to emphasize that Americans are indeed consistently changing their supplements of choice. So this is a fluid practice. This is an article where I got quoted, and I thought it was important because a lot of the supplements, you hear a lot of times that supplements just produce expensive urine. That is such a disservice and actually somewhat dangerous. So there's plenty of good data for many different dietary supplements. We'll look at some resources today. But there's also some that you may want to watch out for a variety of reasons, particularly interactions with medications or with other supplements or with food. So to sort of discount them as biologically inert is a great disservice. But what is really interesting is when you look at these patterns over time, consumers are sort of practicing based on what the research is showing. And this is really important, why we continue to need more studies like our center has done. So we've been leading dietary supplement clinical trials for quite a while. Now, if we look at the most recent Consumer Lab survey, and we're going to take a quick look at Consumer Lab today. So these are, it's quite a large survey, about 10,000 heavy dietary supplement users. So 3/4 of whom are taking, at least 4 supplements. So what are the most common now? Vitamin D at the top of the list. You see magnesium, fish oil, CoQ10, multivitamins, curcumin, and probiotics. All of these actually may be helpful when it comes to EMF mitigation. I've bolded 3, magnesium, fish oil, and curcumin, because there is some published data that these may be helpful in mitigating some of the effects of EMF exposure. And these are constantly changing. So we see the greatest growth in populators in collagen, again, some good reason for that, magnesium. This is one that I think actually most of us should be supplementing with. I eat a lot of leafy greens. We're going to look at some other sources, mackerel and these types of things that contain magnesium. But even still, I think there's a reason most of us do not get enough. And then CBD, which is one of the hottest areas in dietary supplements today. Now, the regulation is an area where there are a lot of questions. You often hear, well, dietary supplements are not regulated. That's not true. They are regulated, but it's a sort of soft regulation. The FDA regulates them as food. So we saw that DSHEA a little bit earlier, where everything pre-DSHEA, any ingredient is considered safe. Anything post-DSHEA, there has to be safety evidence that's provided. And basically how the FDA regulates supplements is there have to be labeling and claims requirements. So things like ingredient names and amounts, directions for use. They can't make health claims. Now that's actually a bit of a problem. When you look at things like probiotics or fish oil or others that have a tremendous amount of clinical data, can't make health claims. It's sort of a disincentive for research, actually. And in 2007, there were a series of good manufacturing practices that were put into place that sort of raised the bar in a lot of ways with regard to quality standards for manufacturing, preparation, storage at the level of facility, and so on. Okay, we still need more, but there is regulation on this side. We don't necessarily need more federal regulation. That's a discussion for another day. There's also further regulation from the Federal Trade Commission that regulates the marketing of dietary supplements. So this basically prevents against misleading and potentially sort of predatory claims of miracle cures and these types of things. This has to be pretty egregious. I think we've all seen supplements, maybe in a few key areas like weight loss, bodybuilding, and sort of sexual function. Those are the 3 that tend to have the most issues, by the way, where the marketing and labeling can be deceptive, but the FTC regulates that. But an issue that I just referred to is that, since FDA regulates supplements as food, they cannot claim to prevent or treat disease because only drugs can make that claim. And we know there are countless exceptions. Again, I mentioned omega-3 fats and lowering triglycerides, probiotics, and reducing the incidence of antibiotic-associated diarrhea, lots of others, folate for neural tube defects, and so on and so forth. So this is sort of a challenge. Now, the federal regulation, I'd say, is pretty soft, and supplements are generally safe. There are some exceptions. I mentioned 3 main categories, sort of the bodybuilding, weight loss, and sexual function arenas. But for the most part, they're safe. Where the bigger problem with dietary supplements is purity regulation. So you'll often also hear you don't know what you're getting. Now that is often true. It's true more often than not, in fact. And we're gonna look at some resources of how you can make, have a discriminating eye towards dietary supplement quality. And these are all resources that are available on the internet, most of which are free, and all of which can be helpful and useful, I think, at the point of clinical care, because we're providing these as resources at the point of clinical care, because to become expert in probiotics or herbs, you need to spend, years really getting to know what companies do things well and so on. So that's a hard expectation, I think, for clinicians and consumers really, to know, well, who makes the best herbs, who makes the best probiotics, what about the best micronutrients, and so on and so forth. These resources are designed to sort of be broad enough to help make that distinction, and be easy enough for both patients to use and informative enough for us to use in medicine. So the way I see this, having been in this field for quite a while, that to make evidence-informed decisions on dietary supplements, there are three major steps. The first is to obtain clarity on what does the product contain. It seems obvious, but it isn't always so easy. The second one's a little more challenging. That's to determine the efficacy of the product formula. All right, and this is one where we get a lot of these combinations of different products and so on that can make that challenging, different ingredients. And then finally, and quite importantly, is to ensure the purity of the specific finished product's ingredients. You go to the health food store or Walmart or wherever, and you'll see 2 magnesiums or 2 probiotics or 2 glucosamine chondroitins or whatever it might be. And I think there's that tendency among many to just get the one that's less expensive or that has the better marketing, but we really need to do better with that. And I'm going to give you some resources that will be helpful. So to start out, I'd say the first thing, and this goes for both food and supplements, is to read the labels, all right, and determine what exactly is in that product. So if we look at the one on the left, there are micronutrients listed there, but we see a whole bunch of other things. When we read the fine print, we see food colorings, preservatives, and so on, and actually fairly cheap forms of vitamins. So cyanocobalamin, for example, is a form of B12. Methylcobalamin would be a better form. And that's really getting into the weeds. But what I would suggest is that certainly reading all the ingredients that are there, because these can cause and do cause issues. And equally concerning, I think, are proprietary blends like you see on the right. This is a particularly egregious example. This would be in the bodybuilding sort of space. So we see the ingredients, many of which are quite useful. So alpha ketoglutarate was actually some interesting data that for aging and lifespan. Creatine monohydrate is one of the best studied supplements, and not just for athletic performance or bodybuilding purposes, but actually cognitive performance and even as a monotherapy for depression. All right, so there's good ingredients here, beta-alanine as well. So this is clearly a product aimed at sort of exercise performance or body composition. But I'll draw attention to caffeine there in an unspecified amount. So with dietary supplements, the top ingredient is in the greatest amount, all the way down to the bottom ingredient is in the lowest. So that's kind of helpful to know. But we don't know how much caffeine's in there. So the product contains 4,145 milligrams of this proprietary blend. You better hope there's not 4,000 milligrams of caffeine in there. It's going to be a pretty uncomfortable experience. So we don't know, right? And I suggest sort of staying away from these where you can. And one resource that is quite useful for this is the NIH, which has an Office of Dietary Supplements, which I think many people don't realize, that has a dietary supplement label database that the goal is to capture the labels of all the supplement products sold in the United States. As of 2019, they had about 70,000 commercially available supplements, and they've got quite a few more now. You've got the link there. I think in the interest of time, we're not going to go through this one because I think the main thing is suggesting to patients to read the labels, all right? But this can be a useful resource for you if someone comes back and says, well, I'm taking, weight gain pump 2000 or something. What's in it? Well, I don't know. So that's where you can get some clarity on ingredients. Now, this is a resource that I think is really useful when it comes to efficacy. So we know what's in the product. That's step one. Step two is it efficacious? Examine.com is just an extraordinary resource that's led by a team of scientists and clinicians that provides really deep information that's practical. So we do systematic reviews and meta-analyses at my center, and I've been doing that funded by the NIH for the Cochrane collaboration for over 20 years now. But a lot of times by the time a Cochrane review comes out, it's a little dated, and it's very useful from a research perspective, but may not be so useful from a point of clinical care perspective. This resource is designed more for that. So there's links to evidence. We'll look at an example. dosage details, potential side effects, interactions, and incredible detail on mechanisms. So this is updated regularly. The articles are linked directly, embedded in the site. The material's free. They do have a store. They don't sell products, but there's like enhanced content. So if someone not interested in joint health, I don't think they have one on EMF mitigation or cancer or whatever the case may be, that's there. And now we're going to take a look at an example of curcumin, which is a supplement that has data for a lot of different conditions, including potential EMF mitigation. Okay, so here we are with curcumin on examine.com. And I'm going to run you through this as one example of many, many supplements that are there. So there's this top level description of what curcumin is. It's the orange, it's component found in the orange spice turmeric. There's actually many curcuminoids, of which curcumin is one. Talks about the anti-inflammatory properties. It's very important for EMF mitigation, and evidence for specific indications that they classify as decent for everything from chronic pain to depression. Talks about the bioavailability, which we can get into here. So I'm just going to kind of quickly go through this. And again, we sort of see the high-level summary here. This would be pretty good patient-facing, talking about what some of the data are for it. What are some of the side effects and drawbacks? Now, interestingly, up to 8 grams of curcuminoids. And this is would be a tremendous amount of turmeric. So this is turmeric and curcumin are not one and the same. Turmeric's great for cooking, but curcumin, if you're looking at getting some of the anti-inflammatory effects, this is the way you need to go. It even mentions here the difference between turmeric and curcumin. You'd need to consume jars of turmeric to get the amount that you get of curcumin in a lot of the clinical studies. And then we go through here and it talks about dosages. And what I like about this site is that it actually gets into the fact that different types of products that have data. So we see BCM95 here, Mariva. The dosage amount is different, and it's based on what's in the research. So this is really helpful. When a patient says, well, how much should I take? Well, this is all kind of curated here. Then we get into this human effect matrix where you can actually click on this. We see a lot of studies for triglycerides, minor effect and reduction, and then links directly to all these different studies that are here. And you can go right through. And then this is also, again, provided at the bottom of the article that they have the page. Okay, so there's a lot here, and as we're going to scroll through, you'll see there's actually been a lot of study for curcumin for a lot of things. Now, we don't see EMF mitigation on here, but we do see some of the things that we know EMFs are associated with. So oxidative stress and lipid peroxidation, general oxidation above, a lot of other things. So we go all the way down the risk here. We can see there's quite a bit. All right, so we'll just keep going down the list, and then we'll get into some more here. So we see some inflammatory cytokines. All right. So once again, we're going to what are some caution, fat solubility, and so on. But we're going to get in actually to some of the what I find is fascinating on this. Let's get into the pharmacology. So all of that high-level summary would be great patient-facing information. Now let's look at, for those that are interested in getting into some of the deeper dives on this. Let's get into so much here. Direct antioxidant. Let's look at this. I'm going to scroll through. So the antioxidant effects. So we see it sequesters superoxide radicals, and we have a link to that. We see some of the summary of the interventions, and we get to inflammation, TNF alpha, NF kappa B. We're going to get into this more as we go along. But we see with great specificity, and throughout the site too, there are sort of summaries that are in blue. So curcumin has potent suppressive effect on macrophage activation and recruitment to sites of inflammation. We see the different mechanisms and through which it works. And just to kind of show you, I've got to scroll all the way to the bottom here. All these studies are linked, and for curcumin, they have 339 citations, okay? And again, it links right to PubMed. You can click through. So this is examine.com, and I would suggest taking a look at this for any supplements of interest. They have really interesting and incredibly informative material. Okay, the next up on our list is, so I really think that Examine, aside from PubMed, is one of the best one-stop shops, I think, to sort of quickly and feasibly find data on supplements and how to take them and what they might interact with and what they might help with and so on and so forth. But that's not where it ends. There are a whole bunch of other factors that influence the quality of a finished product. Obviously the ingredients, but how are they sourced? So different companies have different specifications in terms of how much micro or heavy metals or whatever the case may be is permitted in their product, how they shipped or stored. That's really important for probiotics. Okay, we're at this sort of like drinking from a fire hose in terms of like the effect of the microbiome on our overall health. And we do have some preliminary data that EMFs are toxic to our microbiome. But so you might say, well, probiotics come in, that's great, but probiotics are alive and they can thus die when they're shipped in the back of a hot truck or on a shelf, many of them. So then how they're formulated, what is it informed by research? Are the forms that are utilized bioavailable? Is there transparency or is it these strange proprietary blends? Then the level of the facility, that varies. Some are run, companies are run like drug companies, others are run, very few, but there are some that are out of garages, sort of like that stereotype we might think of. Safety, so things like purity verification that we'll talk about. Traceability, so there are lot numbers on the product. We'll look at that as well. And then finally, who's selling it even? How's it stored? What's the shipping procedures like? So there's a lot that goes into this, okay? So I think the ultimate, again, is when there's peer-reviewed published literature on a particular finished product. I don't mean just on glucosamine and chondroitin as a broad, category, but the actual finished product, the brand, that's really key. Of course, this can be done through a PubMed search. Tools like Examine can be helpful where they actually will link right to that. So that's really the thrust of the efficacy side, but it's not where it ends. We really then need to get into purity. And I mentioned the Consumer Lab survey a bit earlier on. And what that is it's a company run by physicians that have pharma and FDA experience that review hundreds of different supplements and do independent testing on them. These are funded by consumer membership. It's about $30 per year. If you take a lot of supplements, it can be worthwhile. And then product analysis from supplement companies. This is thousands of dollars per year for them. So there are some limitations with this. Everything else we looked at today, or going to look at today, is free. This does have a cost. There is this potential financial conflict of interest if they're paying to get their product analyzed. I mean, I'm not sure if anything's been revealed, but it's something we need to be aware of. But I am going to take you through an example with resveratrol, which is another pretty popular supplement. It's a sirtuin activator that may be helpful for EMF exposure. Okay, so here we are on the consumerlab.com site for resveratrol. So we often think about resveratrol as a flavonoid that's in red wine. It's often actually, when in supplement form, it's extracted from a plant called Japanese knotweed, most often. So we see an alphabetical list here of the products that Consumer Lab tested. You may recognize a fair amount of these brands. Okay. And then again, this is when you have to pay for, so you can see the review now if you go ahead and do that. But they also have a summary, sort of what does resveratrol do? What form is best? There's the Japanese knotweed plant that I mentioned. We see here, they actually approved all of them, with the exception of one that only had 11.8% resveratrol with no information about other constituents. See, resveratrol complex, that's the kind of proprietary blend that I was warning against. So they get into value, how much should be taken, and then potential side effects. So it's and some questions. So it's just a good resource. And I think if you or you're recommending a lot of supplements for your patients, this can be a good thing to look into. Our next peer-to-peer resource is one that is actually completely free, is labdoor.com, and they do, it's another independent lab evaluation of off-the-shelf dietary supplements. This one does not have any cost to the consumer or to the company. They do have a store, but where they actually link to supplements being sold, although their ratings don't favor any products. In other words, they do an A through F system. You can link to buy the A or the F if you were so inclined. Limitation here is that there's a lot of untested products. It's not quite as deep, I would say, as consumerlab.com. But we're going to take a look through here with fish oil, which is the omega-3 fatty acids, which are also have some data to potentially help with EMF exposure. So here we are on the LabDoor page for their fish oil review. So they reviewed 59 products. We see some of these here, some of which are certified for certain conditions. And then if we get into the quality ranking, actually no A's. We see a B plus at the top. And then we go all the way down. Well, actually it's C's, C minuses, but you'll recognize some of these brands. All the way down to F's. So let's look at Spring Valley. Not to pick on them, but that's I believe a Walmart brand. So I would give this this sort of, I often suggest, an easy sort of way to think about this is you value shop for things like paper towels or sponges, potentially, but not things that you're going to consume that have very real biological effects. So you don't really want to value shop for supplements. So we look at this. This has a LabDoor score of 58.4. Label accuracy is quite bad. So we see one serving recorded 320 milligrams of omega-3. This is, and then EPA and DHA, 27% of total fish oil content. So we'll look later, when you look at a label for omega-3s for a fish oil, you want to look at the EPA and DHA content. We see some of what was here, and you can get into full reports of that. And that's free. You can log in. In fact, we'll take a quick look. All right, so we see that, let's even look at the label accuracy. So they claim that they had 320 milligrams per serving, which is actually over its label claim. So that's pretty interesting. It's not accurate, but they did not disclose EP or DHA amounts. That's a big problem. So I can see why this got an F. And they found 140 and 120 milligrams in every serving. All right, so EP and DHA are what you really want to look for when it comes to omega-3 supplements. Let's look at product purity. So they look at PCBs and a bunch of other things that you don't want in there. Nutritional value was okay. Ingredient safety was okay. Efficacy was low because it doesn't have very much of the EPA and DHA. Okay, so this is LabDoor, which is a great resource I think you can suggest for your patients, or to take a look at any products you might be taking. So as we could see, there's a real discrepancy, I think, between many products. Some are great. Some are run as you see here. This is a company in Maryland where I'm located that really are run like I said, like pharmaceutical companies that have third-party lab verification, that really care about quality and do clinical research on their products. And then others that don't. So I mentioned glucosamine chondroitin before. Consumer Lab tested that and found that a lot of the products, had things like they contained lead, or didn't break apart, or didn't have chondroitin, which is an expensive ingredient. And even the less expensive glucosamine ingredient, only 2 of 14 products met the content on the label in a peer-reviewed publication. So, we hear about this a fair amount, and I think it's on us to sort of raise the bar with our expectations in terms of what we purchase. So you may have heard about this story a few years ago, where the New York Attorney General looked at herbal supplements, which can often be the lowest quality because there's a lot that goes into an herb. There's a lot of potential for microbe growth or heavy metals and all kinds of things. Where's the soil? How is it transported? There's a lot of factors that go into that. In any case, they looked at Walmart brand Echinacea and GNC brand of St. John's wort. So St. John's wort is a good antidepressant. It's got good data, but only when it's St. John's wort, not when it contains rice, garlic, and a tropical houseplant. As you see in this example, it didn't have a single trace of the herb. So we really need to utilize these resources to make good decisions because there's a lot of potential with supplements to support our health. So one of the best ways to do this is to, have the expectation that there is purity. So the FDA does not regulate dietary supplements for purity. All right, that would be a massive undertaking, and the resources are not there really to do that. So the better companies hire third-party labs to do purity certification. So basically to show that the product contains what you want it to contain, whether it's the nutritional ingredients in the amounts on the labels. And it doesn't contain what you don't want, things like heavy metals, microbes, other contaminants. So the reason that this is such a good, I'd say, sort of proxy overall for quality is that this is voluntary. Companies don't have to do this. They choose to do this, usually because they care, here are some of the better ones. You see USP, NSF, True Label. These are all third-party labs, and you can get this. Sometimes it's on the label. Other times you can contact the company, and they will share this with you if they've done it. If not, you should say, well, I'm not going to go with your product. It's something you should look into. Okay, so that would apply to dietary supplements for anything from just general health promotion to specific conditions. Now we're going to look specifically at supplements that might be helpful to mitigate EMF exposure. And just the way dietary supplements cannot substitute for a nutrient-dense diet, they are a supplement to and not a replacement for. Dietary supplements cannot substitute for the smart EMF mitigation strategies you're learning about in the conference, may already be doing, such as, and these are all things that I do, either unplugging your wireless router at night, you don't need it then, or using Ethernet, which is what I do personally. Speaking, not putting the cell phone to your head. We've all read the fact that there's even disclaimers and waivers of liability for putting the phone to your head. Speak on speaker, or I actually do use a selfie stick. People must think I'm pretty vain to be walking around with this, but I try to keep as much a distance as I can from the phone to my body. And then, part of what this is, so those are all things we can do. We have less control over where we live. Many of us do, or where we work. We're working remote now, but this is the scene around my office at the University of Maryland School of Medicine from antennasearch.com. Great resource, another one I would suggest looking. So I put our address in there. And see cell phone towers all over the place. This does not include the 5G poles, which actually have one right across the street from our office. This is just the registered antennas and towers that are there. So situations like this, there's no getting around it. All right, so while supplements are a secondary approach, or tertiary, probably even some other things, they can likely help mitigate EMF damage. So this is both in the upstream and the downstream. So the upstream being blocking voltage-gated calcium channels, and the downstream blocking, as you see in this nice graphic here, some of the sequelae of that, so reduced oxidative stress and inflammation. Now, I want to be very clear, we're not any registered clinical trials. I went to clinicaltrials.gov for EMFs and dietary supplements. The only thing you see here is a pulsed electromagnetic field, which can be used therapeutically. So most of these studies, not all of them, some are human studies, are animal studies, and we need more. I think we will be getting more, and I look forward to being a part of this. So let's go upstream. So Martin Paul and others have done this work with, recognizing that EMFs have this flood through voltage-gated calcium channels, and you can actually block some of those with dietary supplements, specifically magnesium. So this is a mineral that's involved in so many different processes, over 300 different physiological processes. Most of the magnesium in our bodies in our bone, thus it has a major role in bone health. So if one is taking calcium, certainly take vitamin D with that, but also take magnesium. But it's also important in protein synthesis, nerve and muscle function, and many other factors. So magnesium has been shown to its intake protect against a variety of chronic diseases, but it's also a well-known calcium channel blocker. So there are calcium channel medications that can be taken, but this is probably not a great strategy for most people. Magnesium would be a much better strategy, particularly since most people are pretty low in magnesium in their diets to begin with. All right, so the magnesium RDA is not met at all ages, but especially older adults. And we see that only, that about half of Americans are insufficient in magnesium intake. Now, how do we find this out? It's not so clear, because if you, write a magnesium lab, or if you yourself, you want to get that, you're going to likely get a serum magnesium test. This is a poor representation of functional status, and we'll see why in a slide. But first, we look at some of the dietary sources here. Brazil nuts at the top, although I would caution eating too many of those because they have so much selenium. And having a few here and there is a good thing. But leafy greens, my personal wild mackerel, personal favorite. But you look at this, a lot of people aren't eating a whole lot of these types of things. So when might someone want to consider magnesium supplementation? Well, if you're not eating most of those foods, many of those foods, which is most people, if you have high EMF exposure, as I do, both at work, and I live in an area where there's a lot of people that have Wi-Fi's, even though I don't, taking magnesium depleting medication, and you see some of them here, and just having low magnesium levels in general. But you don't want to rely on the serum plasma magnesium tests, because these don't reflect total body magnesium stores. I mentioned before, most of the magnesium is in bone, the rest of which is in cells, and less than 1% is in serum. So by the time it is low in serum, you've got major problems, which is why magnesium deficiency is said to be so underestimated by serum alone. The more accurate ways to measure this are red blood cell magnesium. You can order this. A magnesium tolerance test is another way that's a little more invasive, but really look into writing red blood cell magnesium tests for your patients or yourself to see where you really stand with this. And when it comes to actually choosing a supplement, the magnesium are usually bound to some kind of salt, so things like citrate or oxide or so on. And these are some of the forms. There's a few citations here. Magnesium citrate's the most common. But you look at others: malate, orotate, glycinate, chelate, L-threonate. This is actually interesting because it crosses the blood-brain barrier. It doesn't provide as much magnesium, but gets into the brain. You likely want to avoid magnesium oxide. This tends to be one of the cheapest ones, but has laxative effects and is not very bioavailable. The dose is going to vary depending on a variety of things. A pretty big range here, depending on diet, the form, how much EMF exposure is there. As a patient have anxiety, magnesium can be one of the most helpful supplements for anxiety. And then, what are the levels in the red blood cells? So that's magnesium. That's sort of your upstream approach. Now we're going to look at some downstream that can block or reduce some of the damage of oxidative stress and inflammation caused by EMFs. And we know that we need some free radicals, absolutely, and oxidative stress is important. But when it's excessive and persistent, it affects basically every organ system and been associated with most chronic diseases. And I'm going to start with one that we may not think of first. I think antioxidants, we think of vitamin C, vitamin E, and some of those, but melatonin is one. This is actually a hormone produced by the pineal gland in response to darkness. We have decreased production with nighttime blue and green light exposure. We'll look at some solutions for that too. Tend to produce less with aging, not necessarily, but most of the time. And it's, melatonin is most known for its role in sleep, but it goes so much beyond there. It's a very potent antioxidant that promotes the integrity of the blood-brain barrier and has a variety of related neuroprotective effects. Now we know pretty clearly that EMF exposure decreases melatonin. This is both in the in the workplace and elsewhere. And this may influence things like Alzheimer's disease and cancers, fertility. Now, people with sleep disorders, it's inconsistent. There are other things that are going on there. But we have seen in animal models, at least, that melatonin supplementation may mitigate some of the damage of EMFs. So we look at some of the cell phone-induced oxidative stress in rodents. We see reductions with melatonin supplementations. This is one to have in the arsenal. Now, how to take it? Time release is a good thing. So if any of you have ever taken melatonin, sometimes if you take an immediate release form, you'll notice that you might wake up at 3 or 4 in the morning and be kind of wired and ready to go. Time release releases it more slowly. That's sort of the way it would be released in our bodies. Take it about half an hour before bed. The range is in anywhere from 0.3 to 5 milligrams or so at night. The body actually produces micrograms. So when you take these higher doses, you can get vivid dreams, not harmful. I think with this, though, that sort of pulsing or rotating melatonin supplementation may be a good thing to do. It is a hormone. Now, there's been large studies that noticed neither tolerance nor withdrawal at pretty high doses. But it's the kind of thing where I think it can be taken every night. That's pretty clear. But maybe consider taking every other night or every third night or taking a weekend off or whatever the case may be. But definitely want to practice sleep hygiene with this. So melatonin's not it's not the answer. It's not the only thing to think about when it comes to sleep hygiene. We have all these other practices. You may have heard about this, what they call social jet lag, where sleeping on the weekends and getting up early during the week, that can create some problems. Not exercising too late in the day and not too much caffeine or alcohol. There's a lot of things here. This is all pretty good advice. One of my personal favorites that has some evidence supporting it actually is blocking blue light at night. All of the lenses you see of varying, I'd say, style, I should be the judge of that, but on the left, block blue light, this are the amber color glasses, but actually you can get red ones that block blue and green light. I actually wear those ones on the right at night. Not wearing them for presentations or going out anywhere, but they noticed a positive impact of my sleep quality from getting these. And these are, you get the stylish ones, they'll I don't know, with the $50, $100. Some of the ones that are like the ones that I wear, those are $10 on Amazon. So I think this is a good thing to do. And if you quantify your sleep with things like Oura Ring or whatever it is, that you'll see that usually has a good impact. But so that's at night. During the day, getting early morning sun exposure. Doesn't necessarily have to be an early bird per se, but whatever, when one gets up, just to get some sunlight. All right. Can be tough in the winter where the sun doesn't come up until a little later, but this is an important one. So I think most people get up to look at their phone. That's going to be sort of problematic from a variety of stress perspective too, but to actually just try to go and look outside, if you can take a walk, even better. All right, so that's melatonin. We're going to move on now to another very popular supplement, which are omega-3 fats. This is a class of polyunsaturated fatty acids, 3 of which are nutritionally important. You have ALA, which is one of the 2 essential fatty acids. Okay, so the short chain omega-3, which converts to the long chains, which are EPA and DHA. And it's EPA and DHA, these long chain omega-3 fatty acids that have, where you really want to focus on, that have the anti-inflammatory effects. And omega-3 fats can be found in a variety of different sources in the diet. ALA is in plant foods, so things like flax seeds, chia seeds, leafy greens. EPA and DHA tend to be in animal foods, so things like oily fish, your salmon, sardines, your mackerel. There's other animal products too, grass-fed beef, pastured eggs, and so on. It's in some fortified foods. Be a little weary of like a omega-3 fat orange juice or cereal. I mean, it's a fat. It's not going to, it's going to be a nominal amount, I think, in a lot of those types of products. For those that are on vegan or plant-based diets, there are seaweed and algae forms as well. The algae, maybe people eat algae, but that's a supplement form. The seaweed, which is eaten as a food a lot of places, tends to be DHA only, but we'll look at some supplements as we go along. So why might we do this? The first reason is that the standard American diet in general tends to be low in omega-3. There's this ratio of omega-6 to omega-3, which many believe to be important. We evolved as a species on probably a 1-to-1, 2-to-1, 3-to-1 or something like that, because we're eating fish, nuts, but not too many. Too many nuts, even walnuts, which have omega-3, have a lot more omega-6 and omega-3. So you don't really want to be eating nuts as a source of omega-3. And no one historically would have ever had a whole Planters peanuts type of thing, or mixed nuts anyway, grass-fed meat and so on. Now we need both omega-6 and omega-3, but the problem is most people have far too much omega-3 and the standard American diet. I'll give you a second to pause to think, what do you think that ratio is? If historically it was 1-to-1, 2-to-1, 3-to-1, 6-to-1 even maybe. Well, now it's been estimated to be 20-to-1 and probably much higher in a lot of other people that are eating processed food diets, things like grain-fed beef. There's a big difference between grain-fed and grass-fed in this respect. Soybean oil, it's in everything, corn oil, peanut oil, these types of things, right? It's just, going to be exacerbating autoimmune and inflammatory conditions and likely exacerbates EMF exposure given the inflammation that EMFs are causing. So if you look at some of the data here, we know that omega-3 fats are anti-inflammatory in a wide variety of tissues and conditions. These are just some of them, citations to some of them, recent papers and so on. Things like TNF-alpha, IL-6, and so on and so forth. Actually been synergy with melatonin in reducing EMF cytotoxicity in rodent brains. So this could be one where, some omega-3 and melatonin might be a good thing for someone who is in, an area where there's a lot of EMF exposure. So when is this important? If not eating fatty cold water fish, small fish, this is things like sardines, wild caught salmon are fairly small too. Those just have a high omega-6 intake or a high omega-6 to 3 ratio. You can actually assess this at home with an FDA approved finger stick tests. It's about $150, so it's not cheap, but it is available. And you do want, for these types of purposes, 2 to 4 grams per day of combined EPA and DHA. Now, note, if we recall back to the Labdoor example, this may be much more fish oil, 5+ grams or more, or whatever the product is. Fish oil, krill oil, cod liver oil. That's my personal favorite because you get vitamin A and vitamin D with it. Algae oil. All of these are superior to flaxseed oil. So flaxseed oil contains ALA. It's quite prone to oxidation, but ALA also doesn't convert to EPA and DHA very well, especially poorly in men. You get most of the benefits from EPA and DHA. So if someone's on a vegan diet, they would consider an algae-based EPA DHA supplement. There's actually a lot of them out there now that are pretty good. Again, just making sure that getting that 2 to 4 grams per day combined EPA and DHA. So all of these are prone to oxidation. All polyunsaturated fats are, for that matter. So making sure that's in a dark bottle. A lot of times there's added vitamin E or other antioxidants. This is not as necessary for krill oil, which contains its own astaxanthin, which is a carotenoid that makes salmon pink or reddish. Actually a pretty good supplement on its own. And to get very technical for the last point here, to prevent fish burps, which some people say, I tried fish oil, but I kept burping it up. They actually will, on the label, they'll call it repeat. To get around this, there are some enteric-coated products, but storing the bottle in the freezer is a good way, or taking with a meal. When you store in the bottle in the freezer, it's going to bypass the stomach acid, and you're going to have less likely to have repeat or burps, in other words. Okay, now we're going to move on to a pretty deep dive on curcumin. I mentioned this a little bit before. We went through the examine.com content. So this is a flavonoid found in the spice turmeric, the orange spice. It's great for cooking. Don't get it on your hands or clothes. It's not gonna come off very easily, but potent anti-inflammatory effects. Again, we think about the impact that EMF have on inflammation. Curcumin's a NF-kappa B inhibitor. So it's a transcription factor that controls the expression of a variety of different inflammatory genes. And then we see that's downstream from that reduction in numerous inflammatory cytokines. And along that, a decrease in oxidative stress. So curcumin's one that, and we look at things like upregulating glutathione peroxidase and catalase in some of these. So this is a potent tool to have in our anti-inflammatory antioxidant arsenal. Now, if we look at some of the data, there are less inflammation in EMF-exposed microglial cells of rodents that were pre-treated with curcumin. So EMF increased inflammation, no surprise there. But pre-treatment with curcumin reduced NF-kappa B expression and less TNF-alpha, IL-6, and IL-1 beta. And we see in the red boxes here, the left side of the red box is EMF, and then the right side is EMF plus curcumin. So we see a pretty dramatic reduction with curcumin treatment. Now, I mentioned before, you need to take a lot of turmeric to get the curcumin that's used in any of these studies. Reminds me of the old Phil Hartman skit on Saturday Night Live where he had to, eat 100 bowls of fiber 1 to get the amounts in colon blow, or 10,000 bowls to get the amount of fiber it's in super colon blow. He'd have to eat jars of turmeric. I love turmeric. I cook with it all the time, but you'd have to eat so much it would not be feasible to get the amount that's used in these studies. So curcumin supplementation is the way to go for these purposes. It's a little confusing, which is why I think resources like examine.com are so great, because there's lots of different formulations. One thing is for sure, you want to take it with a meal because it's fat soluble. Ideally with some black pepper. Black pepper increases the absorption. A extract of that called piperine dramatically increases it by about 20 times. Now I should warn that it will also dramatically increase the absorption of other supplements and medications. So I mentioned the people coming in with their Santa Claus bag full of different supplements. If many of them have piperine, that could be a bit of an issue. So the dosage, that said, is 500 to 1,000 milligrams per day. Again, we're going to look at the research. And this does have anticoagulant effects. So that's something that's worth keeping in mind. Okay, not to say it's contraindicated, but at least monitoring if a patient's on Coumadin. Lots of other promising supplements. So in the interest of time, we went into several of them. But some of the others are, I mentioned vitamin C. So this is one that we think of for its direct antioxidant effects. So we see less metabolic derangement among rats exposed to Wi-Fi. Then we look at a couple interesting human studies among those that worked on electric power lines or in power plants, that green tea extract and resveratrol. So these green tea has these well-known antioxidant, anti-inflammatory effects through the polyphenols, including EGCG. So when you look for a green tea supplement, look for an EGCG specification on it. Or you can drink, 6 to 8 cups of preferably organic tea. The reason I say organic is that in things like tea leaves, the pesticides and other things can accumulate in them. Resveratrol, I mentioned, sirtuin activator. So we do see less oxidative stress and inflammation from people who consume these supplements. So to kind of tie it all together, how do we become an informed supplement consumers? First, is there scientific evidence for the supplement? We start there, okay? With PubMed, they might take a little longer, examine.com. Are there interactions with drugs or other supplements? See some resources here. And then, looking at the existing dietary supplement quality resources that are out there. So I said, we looked at Consumer Lab and LabDoor for multivitamins in particular, which is a good insurance policy. We didn't get into it too much today. It's not really been studied for EMFs, but there's multivitaminguide.org. So there's resources out there. Again, I think we can collectively help raise the bar with this. Watch out for outrageous label claims. All right. So if you think that Dream Body is going to give you a dream body, you got another thing coming. And I think these are the types of products that tend to not care very much about quality. They're looking to make a quick buck. You want to insist upon an expiration date and products or batch lot numbers, which you see here. That's a sign that the company cares about, has accountability and traceability, that if there are issues that they'll be able to go back and find out what exactly was happening. You definitely want to, read all ingredients on the label. We went through some examples earlier, and get those that have higher quality and less additives and so on. Most definitely seek third-party verification certificates. I think the more that we demand this as consumers or recommending to our patients, the more it's going to raise the bar in the industry. And choosing the brands that are supported with this peer-reviewed research, either through direct PubMed searches or examine.com, and Oftentimes you contact them and you get a sense, do they care about the quality? Is this something that matters to them? Okay, well, I've got my email address here. I've appreciated your attention, and this is an area that I think holds a lot of potential. And in future years, I'm hoping that we see even more clinical studies that sort of manifest that potential. Thank you very much.